Okay, number 62. Only a very small percentage of people from the service professions ever become board members of the 600 largest North American corporations. This shows that people from the service professions are underrepresented in the most important corporate boardrooms in North America. Which one of the following points out a flaw committed in the argument? Okay, so the argument is that the people from service professions are underrepresented in corporate boardrooms. Okay, and the evidence that they give for that is that only a small percentage, right? A small percentage of people from the service professions, so small percentage, let's say low percentage of people from the service professions, only a small percentage of them ever end up as board members, right? So only a small percentage end up as board members. Okay, well, it depends on how many board members there are, right? To know whether or not they're underrepresented, you'd need to know, well, how many service professionals are there, right? Because let's say there's like 500 board members in total. Well, I guess, okay, there's 600 corporations, right? So let's say 5,000 board members. Let's say there's 5,000 board members, and let's say okay, so let's say like 2,500 of them come from the service profession or service professions. 2,500 could be a very small percentage of all the people that are in service professions, right? Over here, 2,500, it would be 2,500 out of maybe, maybe it's like 2 million, let's say. I mean, it's people that are providing services. So like, let's say it's, 100 million, honestly. If 2,500 out of 100 million is a tiny number, right? That's a very small percentage. But if, we'd need to know how many board members there are to say whether or not they're underrepresented here, right? A small percentage of the service professions could still be a huge number for the board members. It just depends on how many board members there are. We just don't know what this number is. This number, we just know it's a small percentage of the service professions, but we don't know how that compares to the number of board members, right? We need a number here. We need more details, basically, right, to know how exactly those things compare. So this is a percentages do not equal numbers flaw. Anytime you see a percent, Nicole likes to say a percent of what, right? What is the percent? And are they comparing it to numbers of something else? And here they are, right? They're comparing a percentage of the service professions to a number of board members, right? And so those are two different categories. Can we compare a percentage from one to a number of another? No, right? We can't really do that. So, okay, let's see if we can find that flaw here. A, 600 is too small a sample on which to base so sweeping a conclusion about the representation of people from the service professions. So for a sample size to be too small, it either needs to be under 30. Statistically speaking, if a sample size is under 30, that means it's just not a big enough sample size. Otherwise, you can criticize the sample size or the sample for being unrepresentative. So if you picked people in a certain way that's not random, then you can say, well, you have an unrepresentative sample size. But it doesn't say that the sample size is not representative, and it doesn't, it has a number over 30. So 600 is not too small of a number to base a conclusion off of a larger group of people. So let's see. B, the percentage of people from the service professions who serve on the board of the 600 largest North American corporations reveals little about the percentage of the members of these boards who are from the service professions. Okay. Yes. Yes, that is describing a percent to numbers. Percents do not equal numbers flaw. Let's read the rest of them really quickly before we pick that one. C, it is a mistake to take the 600 largest North American corporations to be typical of corporate boardrooms generally. Well, they're not saying that that's typical of corporate boardrooms in general. They're saying that these are the most important boardrooms, which is something different. Could we criticize them for that? Perhaps, but this isn't talking about that criticism, right? C is saying, well, they're saying that they're typical of corporate boardrooms in general. They never said that, right? They never said, hey, this is what all corporate boardrooms are like. This is what corporate boardrooms are like in general. They said these are the most important corporate boardrooms. And if we want to criticize them for that, we could perhaps, but C is not even doing that. So we can cross C out. D, it is irrelevant to smaller corporations whether the largest corporations in North America would agree to have significant numbers of workers from the service professions on the boards of the largest corporations. Okay, there's a lot of things wrong with D as an answer. Smaller corporations versus larger corporations. Do we care if it's irrelevant to smaller corporations? They never mentioned smaller corporations, right? So can we criticize them for something that they never even talked about and that they're not trying to talk about? No, right? If they're not even trying to talk about it, how can we criticize them for it? So the smaller versus larger thing is an issue. And then the other issue here is that the corporations would have to agree to have significant numbers of workers. They didn't say whether corporations would agree to have a certain number of workers, right, from the service profession. They just have a certain number or they don't, right? This agreeing to have a specific number of workers, that language is never used in the original, and D is kind of assuming that it is. So we can cross out D for that reason. E, the presence of people from the service professions on a corporate board does not necessarily imply that that corporation will be more socially responsible than it has in the past, than it has been in the past. So we never mentioned anything about people being more socially responsible, right? That was not in the stimulus at all. And, can we criticize this argument because something does not imply that a corporation will be more socially responsible? No, right? They never talked about that. If you said, well, cats are really cute, can I, argue against that by saying, or can I say you committed a flaw because you never mentioned dogs? Well, no, it doesn't matter because you weren't talking about dogs. You were only talking about cats, right? So it doesn't matter to this argument what's going on with whether corporations will be more socially responsible because they were never talking about that and they were never trying to talk about that. Okay, so B would be our answer here. And let's look at what B is actually saying. Let's break it down. So the percentage of people, right, from the service professionals who serve on the boards of the 600 largest North American corporations. Okay, so that would be the percentage of people, the percentage of the service professionals that are also board members, right? Who also happen to be board members. Okay, this number, whatever that percentage is, right, here in this sample scenario, we made it 50% basically because we said it was 2,500 out of 5,000. So here it was 50%. That number doesn't tell us anything about the percentage of the members of the boards who are from the service profession. Oh, okay, I see. So that's talking about, okay, I wasn't sure whether it's talking about service professionals in general. So the percentage of service professionals in general that are the members that end up here, maybe like in this example, it was a tiny percent, right? It was like less than 1%. So that's what they're talking about there. Like this number that we have here, this percent doesn't tell us anything about this percent, right? So if I had to accurately describe this flaw, it's a percent does not equal percent flaw, right? Just because we know something about this percentage here doesn't mean that we know anything about this percentage over here, right? The percentage of service professionals in general who end up as members of these corporations, it could be a small percentage here, but still be a big percentage here. And we don't know because we don't know how many service professionals there are out there. We don't know how many board members there are out there, right? So we don't know how these percentages compare. And that's the issue here. Almost any time for a flaw question where you see a percent, the correct answer choice will be about how we don't know how that percent equates or relates to the percentage or the number of another category. Percent does not equal number. Percentage does not equal percentage. If you're looking at two different groups or two different categories, if you know just a percent from one and a number or a percent in the other, that doesn't tell you much about how those two things compare. Just because one is smaller percentage-wise doesn't mean the other is necessarily smaller percentage-wise. So B would be our answer here.